Number 1. Truck. I liked going and visiting my cousin Clay's family when I was younger. He was the same age as me. Many of my relatives lived out in the country, but his family was much different than the others. They were more enjoyable to be around. They didn't just sit around and talk about the past all the time. They actually got up and did things. Plus, Clay and I liked the same toys and games and things of that nature. Together, we both had a really huge collection of G.I. Joe action figures. The only big difference between us is that he liked Serpentor, and I was loyal to the Cobra Commander. We were 12 years old when this happened. Clay had an older brother named Dale that I really didn't hang around with too much. He was always out hanging with his friends and rarely did anything with his younger brother, who was 4 years his junior. This year, Dale had gotten his driver's license, and his father had given him an old, if somewhat small, pickup truck. He spent a lot of time driving it with his best friend when he got it. On the night that this happened, Dale was supposed to be watching Clay and myself. It was definitely not his favorite thing to do, however, but he also knew better than to leave us alone. If his mom called the house and Clay answered it, and he wasn't there, their dad would blister his butt. So on this night, Dale wanted to go out driving with his buddy Kenny. So the only way he could do it without getting into trouble was to take Clay and me with him. He let us ride in the bed of the truck, which we wanted to do anyway. After we picked up Kenny, we all stopped at the gas station and got bottles of pop. They headed out driving again. Dale liked driving up and through the hills. He would drive a lot faster than he probably should have on those roads, though. I liked it, even though riding in the bed of a truck through the dark country roads was a new experience for me. Being in the back, we didn't have the benefit of headlights, and there weren't street lamps out in the hills, so it was really, really dark. We could see stars in some parts, where the trees did not reach over the top of the road, and that was pretty cool. Dale would drive pretty fast even when he probably shouldn't, but he didn't drive too fast, just faster than our parents would have done. Clay and I pretty much enjoyed it, sitting in the two back corners of the bed of the truck. The two of us were really enjoying the ride. We had to yell at each other in order to talk, but the wind was great, and so was everything else. Occasionally, one of us would get hit by a small and skinny branch, but we didn't mind at all. Suddenly, Dale hit on the brakes of the truck. He hit them hard and fast, and the truck stopped hard and fast. Clay and I tumbled forward a little bit, due to the sudden stop, but we didn't get hurt or anything. Holy shit, we heard Kenny exclaim from the front of the truck. Clay called out to his older brother, asking him what was wrong. Dale didn't answer, though. Clay and I were able to look out the front window, though, and what we saw scared the living crap out of us. There was a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked dazed and was stumbling around like he was drunk. That was one thing, but he looked like he was covered in blood. His hands and arms looked more covered than any other part of his body. All this happened in just seconds, and the moment the guy saw us, he looked shocked. He ran off, stumbling into the woods, while the four of us just sat there in shock. Clay started shouting at Dale to get moving to get out of there, but Dale didn't move. He told us to stay in the car, too. He got out and walked over to the side of the road. Will Clay wasn't about to listen to his brother, and he jumped out over the side of the road. He ran to the front of the truck, and then I saw a horrified look on his face, as he obviously spotted something else. You would think such a horrified look would tell me that I didn't want to see it, but I also jumped out, and I had to see what it was that had freaked him out so much. I jumped out of the truck and ran to the front. I nearly vomited when I saw what my cousins had been so shocked by. There was some sort of animal on the side of the road. at least something that had formerly been an animal. It was about the size of a medium-sized dog, but it was so bloody and apparently skinless that we couldn't tell what it was. It was just a big bloody mess. We didn't really know what to think about it. All we could do was guess that either the man had killed it or something we didn't know. But whatever it was, the whole scene was a scary as hell thing to see. Dale and his friend considered going after the man to find out what had happened, but decided against it. They eventually just got back in the truck and drove around a bit more before taking us home. None of us mentioned it to our parents. It was such a strange and weird thing that we felt it was better just not talking about it. Number 2. Drunk drive. I will give you a little background on my life growing up. It leads to this happening. I've had some scary moments in my life, but this one has got to be one of the ones that I truly felt was threatening to my life. I grew up with one sister and one brother. We moved around a whole lot while we were younger. My family, however, was from Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia tri-state area. We visited them many times in our childhood, but we never really lived there ourselves. I grew up for the first 12 years of my life on military bases, so the country life was not something I was very used to. My parents got divorced when I was 11 years old, and my dad got custody of us. This was something that was actually pretty rare at the time that it happened, but my mom had no job, no place to live, and no way to provide for us, so we ended up with my dad. My dad was a severe alcoholic. It just got much worse for him after the divorce, too. Hardly a day passed where he didn't drink himself into a stupor. In a short period of time, he had several stays in psychiatric hospitals. I remember one time when he actually gave my older brother my mom's phone number. He took his gun and went off to kill himself. Although ultimately he didn't do it, it was a terrifying experience for all of us kids. He was gone for several hours, and we had no idea if he was alive or dead in that time. It wasn't until my dad met the lady who would become my stepmother that he began to pull himself out of this a little bit. The suicidal stuff stopped for a while, and so did the stays in the psychiatric hospitals, but the drinking didn't stop with them. And there were still some really horrible times for us kids once those two got married. My dad was obsessed with living out in the country, so he took a disability leave from the military in order to move out to the country. If I remember correctly, he was given a 3-year leave, at the end of which he would be evaluated again, and if he was deemed fit to serve, he would serve out his enlistment. I guess that's not really important to the story, but it gets us to where we are going. We moved to Ohio at that point, and I had my first taste of living out in the country. I hadn't been looking forward to it myself, but once we were there and I got to exploring the country, hiking, finding all sorts of things out there, I began to like it a whole lot more. We lived in St. Clairsville, Ohio for around a year. I absolutely hated living there. I was bullied a lot at the school, so when summertime came around, it made me appreciate living in the country a whole lot more. We lived way out in the hills, and I didn't have to see any of the people who bullied me at all. That lasted for a year. As became a pattern for us over the next years, my dad would stop paying his rent and would get us kicked out of the house we were in. So we ended up moving around a whole lot. And the reason I bring this up is that his drinking just got worse and worse, and he would actually on occasion let us go hungry as long as he had his beer. Getting drunk was really more important to him than anything else. On the night that this happened, we were in Wheeling, West Virginia, visiting my stepmother's family. Of course, my dad was drinking beer with his father-in-law and getting drunk off his ass. When it was time to go home, he was completely wasted. But, as was normal with him, he would still be the one to drive home. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive from their house out to ours. When my dad was really, really drunk, he would get mean and sometimes violent. And we knew this, and didn't try to tend to challenge him on it. Not even my stepmom, who was an evil bitch herself, would call him out on anything when he was in one of his really drunken moments. Well, my dad was so wasted that when he turned off the main road, he took the wrong road out into the hills. My older brother, being the only one who might have been able to stand up to him, wasn't really paying attention, but I noticed it and it bothered me. I was too scared of my father's abusive rage, though, to say anything. We went driving through the hilly areas in the dark, and none of it looked very familiar in any way. I mean, we were driving up and down hills on gravel roads with lots of trees and stuff, but I could tell it wasn't somewhere that we were used to being. I kept wanting to mention it to my dad, but also kept hoping that one of the country roads would interact with a road that would take us home, but I wasn't getting so lucky. I could tell as time went on that everyone knew that my dad had gotten us lost, but no one said anything yet. It wasn't until he started to become visibly agitated that we realized that things might get very bad. Of course, with my dad's brain so heavily intoxicated, it wasn't helping him to be able to find a way home. We kept driving around the wrong roads, seeing endless and endless swaths of trees, but never finding anything. It was around that time that my younger sister piped up in order to help us figure something out. She was 7 years old at the time, and still at that age where she didn't know what would or would not set our dad off, but she asked him for something about why he took the wrong road, and when we would get home. My dad lost it after that. He pulled the car to the side of the road. He told all three of us kids and our stepmom to get out of the car. When my stepmother protested, he told her that unless she wanted to get backhanded, she would get out of the car. Not knowing what he was trying to do, the four of us got out of the car. We all stood by the side of the road. My dad then got out of the car. He always kept a revolver under the front seat of the car, and we all noticed that he had the gun in his hand. He forced all three of us kids to stand by the ditch on the side of the road. He then went into a tirade about how if we thought that we could take him in a fight, we should try to do it right now. He babbled on and on about it being our fault that we got lost because we hadn't told him that he had made a wrong turn. And then right away also got mad at us, accusing us of thinking that we know better than him as to which way to go. And the whole time he was doing this, in this drunken stupor, he kept waving the gun around. I don't really think my brother was scared. He was 2 years older than me, and he wasn't really scared of very much. He was a huge guy, even at 15 years old. But I knew that my sister and I were terrified. And he just kept swinging that gun around. And he had the gun cocked, and his finger on the trigger the entire time. Very often the gun was pointed at one of us. As it was flailing around, it would take simply the jerk of his trigger finger to shoot one of his kids on the side of the road. I'm not sure how long it went on, and truthfully I didn't hear most of what he talked about. I do remember hearing the gun go off though, and I cringed and checked my sister to make sure she hadn't gotten shot. Fortunately, no one did. My dad then stumbled over to the ditch on the other side of the road. He then proceeded to vomit in the ditch, and after he was done doing it, he passed out. My stepmother tried to make us get him and help him into the car, but we refused to do it. My brother pushed her out of the way, and he got my sister and I into the car. He didn't have a driver's license, but he knew how to drive. He drove my sister and I back to the house, leaving my drunken dad and stepmother there. I don't really know what happened after that. I know once my stepmother and dad had gotten home, they confronted my brother about it, but my brother told my dad if he ever did anything like that again, he wouldn't live through it. No longer being brave from being drunk, my dad and stepmom were put in their place and dropped it. I wish I could tell you this was the last time something like that happened. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Number 3. Late night walk. I was always different than everyone else in my family. Even to this day, most of my family members tend to go to sleep early in the evening and get up early in the morning. That was never my thing. Personally, I always enjoy being up when it's dark outside. I have always liked the night. My mind works better when it's dark outside. I'm more creative and more focused. Plus, I just feel completely better when it is nighttime. I grew up in the country, albeit in several different houses and places. But wherever those places were, they were houses in the country. Being also the sort of person who likes spending time alone, this worked really well for me. I had so much time to simply be by myself and be left to my own thoughts. I would very often go for walks in both the day and night. I didn't really get too scared at night. I wasn't afraid of the dark or anything. So for me, going on late night dark walks was not that unusual of a thing. We hadn't lived in that house that we lived in when this happened for very long. It was set in the front of a holler. The road was a gravel one, but our house wasn't too far down from the paved road. This road was at the foot of the hills, so we were not really in the hills, but on lower ground. There were a decent number of houses on both sides of the gravel road, but they weren't really close together by any means. There was enough room to feel like you were out in the country, and that things were somewhat private. I think out of all the places we lived, I liked that one the most. However, there were some weird things going on in that area. A lot of times, even in the daytime, there was a creepy feeling that I would sometimes get. It was that proverbial feeling of being watched, even when no one was around. I was never able to know where it was coming from either. It wasn't unusual for me to take walks both during the day and at night. I liked to walk up the roads that led up into the hills. Most were dirt roads. But I like nature, and I love to see all the different trees and things like that. I mostly like the birds in the daytime, and at night I just like the noises. I like the frogs, the crickets, the owls, and the other noises of the night. I rarely ran into people when I took the walks. There were houses up in the hills, of course, but they were even further apart than the houses that were on the road at the bottom of the hills. Anyway, there was one night when something very bizarre happened that I have no explanation for, even to this day. I couldn't sleep this night. I kept tossing and turning and thinking of things. Usually it was my mind being in overdrive that kept me from sleeping when I was younger. I just always had so much to think about. Finally, I decided that I wasn't going to get any sleep, and that a walk would be the best thing for me. So I got up and trotted out of my house for a walk. I figured a nice walk in the hills would be just the way to go. If I took my time and just relaxed during the walk, I would feel a lot better. So I set out to take my walk. I turned off the gravel road onto a dirt road that led out into the hills. This was a way that I had taken many times when I went out for a walk. Although I took a flashlight with me, the light of the moon was enough for me to be able to see my way. I usually use these walks to do some deep thinking. The wind, the breeze, and the sounds were all calming enough for me to enjoy the walk and get lost in my thoughts. At one point, when I was walking downhill, I was surprised to see someone walking toward me. It looked like an old man, maybe in his 70s or something like that. I was never really good at guessing the age of those I don't know. Although I was surprised that someone else was walking out there this night, I wasn't afraid or anything like that. I especially wasn't scared of an old man. We just kept walking towards each other, and I waited for the inevitable greeting between two walkers that always seemed compulsory. When the guy got up to me, I looked at him. I will admit that I only gave his features a glancing look. I hated to look at anyone more than was necessary. I always thought that would make other people uncomfortable. "Good evening," I said to him as we passed each other. "The crickets are out tonight, huh?" he asked in response to my greeting. We then walked past each other. I put the old man out of my mind pretty quickly, and I just went on with my stroll. It wasn't too long, though, before I noticed something else. There was someone else walking towards me on the road. It had been strange enough to have encountered the first man this late at night, but to find a second person was just bizarre. Before the man got too close to me, I looked as carefully as I could at him. The closer he got, the better I could make him out. Now, I hadn't paid a lot of attention to the first man, but I did have a look at him. This second man looked to be around the age of the first man, and he also appeared to be dressed the same way as well. My mind started spinning. Was it the same man? I asked myself, knowing that it would be impossible for that to be true. But I thought I would pay more attention to his features this time. As the guy walked closer to me, I did watch him closer, and I could have sworn that it was the same man that I had seen before. I paid attention to his face, his clothes, his hair, and this time I had no problem looking too long. It looked like the same man to me. "Good evening," I said to the old man as he passed me. "The crickets are out tonight, huh?" he asked me as he walked by. Hearing those words made me stop. I had been thinking I was kidding myself, that it couldn't have been the same old man both times, but he replied the exact same way both times. I was surprised and I suppose a little scared. It was such an odd happening. There was no way the original man could have ended up in front of me again. He would have had to get off the road and run inhumanly fast through the forest in order to do it. I shook my head and tried to think about the weird experience. I decided it was just a weird happening and left it at that. I was walking further down the street again when I got the start of my life. There was a third man walking toward me. Encountering one man at night was unusual enough, so two was unheard of, but three was just improbable. But as the man got closer, and I realized that it was another old man, I felt a chill run down my spine. What was going on? My nervousness had increased when I realized it was an old man again, and since I had gotten a good look at the second man who had passed me, I could tell from a distance that the man approaching me was dressed just the same. This time I felt nervous and a tad bit scared as the pedestrian approached me. The closer and closer he got, he looked exactly like the man that I'd already seen walk by twice. This time when he got close to me, I tried to look away, but I couldn't do that. I had to see what he looked like. As he came up to me, I was sure 100% that it was the same man that I had seen before. "Hey there," I said nervously as the man approached me. I tensed, waiting to hear what he would say in return. "The crickets are out tonight, huh?" he asked and walked by me. I couldn't look back after him as he passed by. I was very scared by this strange occurrence, and I just wanted to move on. There was a road not too far ahead that I could turn off of that would lead me back down to the main gravel road. While I was walking towards that road, I was nervous. I was expecting the old man to appear before me a fourth time. I kept waiting for him to appear as I walked on. It was a very scary feeling because it was so dark out and quite eerie after what had just happened. I was absolutely on edge. I eventually arrived at the road before seeing a fourth incarnation of the old man. I turned on it and walked back down to the main road. I was still expecting the fourth man to walk by me, but I was able to make it down the hill, then onto the main road back to home, without encountering him a fourth time. I ended up telling the story to my family, who didn't believe me. My sister, who was older than me, told me that this was a story she had heard at school. It was supposed to have been an old man who was killed while out taking a walk in the hills up by where we lived. People have reported seeing him passing them multiple times while walking out there. She thought I had heard the story before, which I hadn't, and was just pretending that I'd seen it happen. It was a terrifying experience, even if it seems like it might not have been. Seeing something that unexplainable and weird, even thinking of it now, makes me shiver.
Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to click the subscribe button and bell below, or click the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment, and share this video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.